I love nature, nature is cool. The forest is my classroom, the earth is my school. Trees are my teachers, animals are my friends, and on this school all life depends. I love nature, nature is cool. The forest is my classroom, the earth is my school. Trees are my teachers, animals are my friends, and on this school all life depends. I love all of nature, yes it's true. That means I love myself and I love you too. When I look around me, nature's all that I'm seeing. Plants, animals, earth, sky, and human beings. Nature is like one big community. Many animals might live inside just one tree, and that tree gives us oxygen to help us breathe. This whole interaction is called ecology. I love nature, nature is cool. The forest is my classroom, the earth is my school. Trees are my teachers, animals are my friends, and on this school all life depends. I love flowers, they are so pretty. I love them in the forest and I love them in the city. And I love mushrooms too, on a pizza or in salad. But my favorite place for mushrooms is right here in this love ballad. I love children and I love H2O. And children who love nature can help the rivers flow by protecting habitats like wetlands and wet meadows. When we work together, we can all help nature grow. So I love nature, nature is cool. The forest is my classroom, the earth is my school. Trees are my teachers, animals are my friends, and on this school all life depends. So let's love nature right now with all our hearts. That's right, this present moment is a great place to start. We don't need any money, it might take a little time. We need to open up our arms, hearts, mouths, and minds, so we can see the gifts Mother Nature can bring. When we learn to appreciate it, it makes us want to sing. And when we are smiling and singing our song, other people hear us and they want to sing along. They sing, I love nature, nature is cool. The forest is my classroom, the earth is my school. Trees are my teachers, animals are my friends, and on this school all life depends. Upon this school all life depends.
On behalf of our global She community, I'm delighted to welcome you to our global friends and our three luminaries. Lobsang Phuntsok, joining us from India, Bhante Buddharakkhita, joining from Uganda, and Brother Chan Pháp Dung, joining from California. Welcome to our discussion of how Buddhist ethics are informing humane-based education to help us grow resilience, creativity, and joy, yes, even joy, in the face of our ecological crisis. My name is Mark Foley, and in addition to serving as president of JAMSE International, I'm also grateful to be collaborating on the She Initiative with Orla O'Sullivan from Wake Up Schools, and Rahina Haralo from Buddhist Across Traditions, and Vasuda Wanchu from the Jamse Gatsal Children's Community, who join us on the panel today. Although Vasu is sitting off screen, I think. Vasu, are you visible? You say hello. We also wish to acknowledge our dear friend, Jacques Price-Reese, who we hope is on the webinar with us today. As Jacques introduced all of us last year. Jacques is the original sprouter of the sprouting. Thank you, Jacques. After sharing a few opening comments and properly introducing our luminaries and talking about our Zoom protocols, I will hand off to Orla and Rahina, who will facilitate today's conversation. We are indeed in good company today. Lobsang, Bhante B, and Phap Dung have been on the road of showing what compassion in action looks like for the greater part of 6 decades combined. Inspired by their work, a global open source community has sprung up called SHE, Sprouting Humane Education for the Ecological Crisis. Today is the first of what we hope will be many conversations and events to further our mission to continue sprouting conversations, ideas, and engaged action within the framework of humane education and our ecological crisis for both our generation and future generations. We aspire to continue the sprouting that is already happening, because today we will hear about the engaged action of Lobsang, Bhante B, and Phap Dung as they have dedicated their adult lives to compassionately caring for humanity and our planet. Their actions have demonstrated a deep understanding of this quote by Thich Nhat Hanh, and we hope to send out new growth in this regard. When you realize the earth is so much more than simply the environment, you will be moved to protect her as you would yourself. Why the focus on humane education? While this quote at the top from our good friend Zoe says it all, I also offer the following words from Zoe as they reflect how Buddhist ethics are interwoven with humane education. Humane education helps people put core values of kindness, empathy, generosity, responsibility, and integrity into practice in a complex, globalized world in which our daily choices affect humans, non-human animals, and ecosystems across the planet. In Bhante B's book, Caring for Our Planet, Buddhism and the Environment, he shares this insight. Just take the H in heart, move it to the end, and you'll get earth. To me, I think that says it all right there. Today, we're going to hear about humane-based educational models and learning centers of both today and tomorrow. Lobsang, Bhante B, and Phap Dung have been putting their heart into the earth for a very long time. And there's a lot to earn from that experience that will shape education for generations to come. Why the focus on the ecological crisis? This message, this invitation, if you will, by His Holiness the Dalai Lama says it all. Now is our time. Now is our time to take action. Lobsang, Bhante B, and Phap Dung accepted this invitation a long time ago. And today we will learn what that means. Before handing off to Orla and Rahina, I wish to highlight the work of our 3 luminaries by way of brief introductions. Brother Chan Pháp Dung is an elder monastic of Plum Village. His passion for restoring our human connection led to the creation of Deer Park Monastery in California and the global Wake Up School movement, in which he still offers mindful leadership. His passion for restoring connection with Mother Earth led to his representation of Plum Village at the pivotal COP21 climate conference in Paris in 2015. Brother Phap Dung, welcome. Bhante Buddharakkhita is known as the spiritual gardener for his compassionate work around the globe and for bringing Buddhism to his homeland. He is the founder of Buddhist Peace Schools and the Uganda Buddhist Center, where he also serves as abbot. Bhante B, as a much-loved teacher in many countries, has been compassionately tending to human hearts and planet Earth for more than 2 decades. Bhante B, welcome. Lobsang Phuntsok is the founder of the Jamse Gatal Children's Community in northeastern India. A once described brave social experiment, Jamse Gatal, Tibetan words which mean garden of love and compassion, has become a model community of sustainable and mindful living, as well as a pedagogical model of educating the heart, mind, and body. His work is featured in the Emmy Award-winning documentary film, Tashi and the Monk. Lobsang, welcome. We also have an opportunity to amplify the work of Lobsang, Bhante B, and Phap Dung by donating, offering dana if you like, in support of their collective missions. We'd like to note that 100% of every dollar donated online using this link, which Jenny will put in the chat, will be equally shared by all 3 luminaries. And we'll share more information about this towards the end of this conversation. And last but not least, I want to just quickly talk about some Zoom guidance. There may already be some, I see one message in the chat, Jenny probably posted. If anybody has any technology issues or questions, please put a message in the chat and Jenny DeGlopper will be happy to help you. You probably already figured out that the best way to see the panel and our luminaries is to use the gallery view. We would, at the end, love an opportunity to take questions from our global friends and our global participants on the call today. So if you have a question for any one or all 3 of our luminaries, please put the question in the Q&A feature, which is right next to the chat in the Zoom window down at the bottom. And with that, thanks again for joining us, and the floor is all yours, Rahina and Orla.
So, welcome everyone. And firstly, apologies. We knew that we were going to go global, but we did not know how global we were going to be. So those who are seeking translations in Spanish or French, unfortunately, at this stage, we can't offer that. So a deep apology in advance for that. Before we start, I just wanted to just say that Ola and I will be facilitating some of the questions, and we created some of them in anticipation that this may resonate with you and accommodate the huge variety of attendees that we have today from all types of gardeners and gardening assistants. But before we start, I want us to really take 3 breaths to locate ourselves in this moment. Some of us are already in tomorrow. Some of us are still in yesterday. So let's all take the first breath to become truly present in this moment. In taking the second breath, let our feet connect to the earth, a reminder of why we are here, a reminder that we are of the earth. And the third breath, let us offer gratitude and thanks to all the wisdom and the energy of others that has led us to us all being here today. So I seek a little bit of your indulgence as we locate this space. Ola and I, as I said, we will facilitate jointly, so there'll be an exchange between us as we move between us two. I just wanted to share a little bit of a backdrop of how we plan to facilitate today. Firstly, we want to acknowledge that our luminaries have much wisdom, and we could be here for many years and still not soak up all their wisdom. They also are very enthusiastic and always eager to share their flowers and fruit of their wisdom. However, we are limited in time. So to manage this, we will run this as a series of key questions. Firstly, addressing one luminary, and then getting the others to chime in, or as we keeping on the gardening theme, to graft on the information that has been shared, so that together that we can create a bounteous garden of conversation. We may therefore not ask all the luminaries the same question. And Ola and I, we have our different styles, and we'll weave in additional comments and questions as required to facilitate additional in-depth probing, if you want to use that term. Ola in her soft, dulcet Irish tones, and Rahina in her very direct South African style. So you'll get a balance of styles from us. And so to manage time in this conversation, so as to remind us when perhaps we may want to weave in another luminary, one of us will invite the bell gently to remind the luminary talking that it's about time to prune their sharing, awakening the bell. And if that doesn't work, then we'll use the thunder and the rain of our voices to rain a little bit on their parade. So we may invite the full sound of the bell loudly, or use the thunder of our voices. So just to locate that as to how we'll manage those sessions. Again, luminaries, Bhante B, Brother Phap Dung, Genla. At any time, if you wish to have the sound of the bell because you feel that it's appropriate for you, please just remind us and we'll invite that bell for you. For those of you, as Mark has said, you're welcome to insert your questions into the chat as we go along. Ola and I will try and weave that into the conversation if we can. And if not, we will address them at the end. So Ola, is there anything that I've missed that you wish to add to?
It's so beautiful, Rahina. Thank you so much. Maybe I can just underscore that we're going to use the Q&A channel for questions and not the chat, so that we're not reading two channels. So questions in the questions channel. Thank you.
Thank you, Ola. And so I don't think I've missed anything, but I will take a deep breath just to locate the first question. So I think we've heard a little bit, a lot, read. Mark has introduced our luminaries. I love this word luminaries. So we're going to try and weave in light and light bulb as much as possible into our conversation. I would like to commence, we've heard a lot about them, but I'd like to bring the energy of their voices into this space now. And I would like to ask them briefly to share a little bit about themselves, or if that is a bit too difficult at this stage of the day, then what inspired you to be with us today? So either a little bit about yourself, or what inspired you to be with us today. And these are insights in their own right, or you may wish to do both. So let's start with someone who's been awake today the longest. And I think that's you, Genla Lobsang. So maybe we'll start with you, if that's okay, or with answering that question.
Absolutely. I think it's a time for my sleep. Thank you, Rahina, Ola, and Mark, and Jenny, and all the people who made this opportunity possible. And I'm truly honored to be with a brother, Phap Dung, and Bhante Buddharakkhita. And I'm actually participating for this conversation from the space of learning. And absolutely, it really is inspiring. You know, the topic you guys choose is a very relevant, and I think it is relevant to everybody, relevant to every sentient beings. And I think it is definitely, I think, a time to really reflect on these issues and try to support or maybe inspire and encourage all of us to be a more mindful way that we should live in this only planet we have for ourselves and our future generation. So I'm truly inspired by, even the theme itself, and then, truly honored to be with two amazing speakers who are, been working in the different parts of the world, and excited to be really connect with you guys and, possibly visit. As I mentioned, I'm feeling a little under the weather today. So, but I am really inspired. And so we started this, what we call a Jamse Gasal Children's Community. Jamse Gasal means in our language is the garden of love and compassion in the remote Himalaya, foothills of the Himalaya near Bhutan in Tibet. Is a beautiful place, but winter is sometimes too cold. That's what I see. I'm layered up with the 2 jackets and still feeling a little cold. The entire philosophy is also based on a nature. As we say, garden of love and compassion philosophy is so much related to the gardening. So I would love to actually hear more from the Bhante Ji and Brother Phap Dung, and try to maybe keep quiet as much as I can today. So thank you for the opportunity again.
Thank you, Genla, Lobsang. So the next person, I think, who's been awake a little longer than you, Brother Phap Dung, and that's Bhante B from Uganda. So perhaps, again, just to repeat, what is it that called you to be in this space today? Or is there anything you'd like to share about yourself?
Yes, thank you very much, Rahina. And I've been actually before on a kind of a conference with you online. So thank you very much for inviting me again. So what inspires me, I want also to thank all our hosts and also our luminaries who are part of the panel. Really, I'm very grateful for your wisdom. What you've done is really amazing. That opening video really officially made my day. I didn't know how much you people have learned. I mean, what you've done really. So for me, it was amazing. So anyway, what really brings me here is really my inspiration to really to save the planet where it's our home, that's all what we all share this planet. And when I look at the theme, it's relevant today. In fact, given the current ecological crisis that we're facing, climate change, conflict, and these are problems that we are facing in this planet and this world. So this is something that I always want to see. How can we use ancient wisdom in Africa, in Buddhist tradition, and all different wisdom traditions around the world? How can we use them to save our planet? And I've written a book called Planting Dharma Seeds. And when you talk about gardening and all this, it's really, I feel at home, because this here, I'm in Africa, I'm planting seeds, So I like agricultural metaphors because they're real, they're close to me and all that. So really, when it comes then to education, I really found out the meaning of the word education, eduk, to bring forth. So we want to bring forth all our human qualities in order to see how we can develop them and educate ourselves, not just learn, but educate. In other words, it's a very holistic approach to really education that we need to apply to save our planet. Personally, I've been in a couple of places, like maybe a few places, but big places. I mean, a big chunk of my time, it was in India, where I spent many years in India, and in Africa, of course, born in Africa. and also in West, in America, I've spent over a decade over there. So I wanted to combine all those three places and see their wisdom they have, and then try to apply them in education system here in Uganda. And I found out for sure more education was very important, and still very important and relevant. And that's what the passion I bring here about ecological crisis, how to solve it using a sound education system. Thank you very much. Thank you, Rahina, for inviting me.
Thank you, Bhante B. Last but not necessarily least, Brother Phap Dung, over to you. Again, just to re-prompt, anything about yourself to locate into the space, or what called you or inspired you to attend or be part of the panel today.
Dear everyone, thank you for organizing this. And yeah, anything involving children, education, that's I know Sister Orla is the one helping us with Wake Up Schools, which is our teachers' movement to bring education, bring mindfulness and the practice into education. And that's what I do in the monastery anyways, to be with children. I specialize in difficult children in the monastery, the ones who their parents made to come to the retreat. And I just enjoy being with children to support them. But the Wake Up School is also to support teachers, to support them, to give them tools and practices so that they can sustain themselves. I think we all know as teachers, they burn out, and the attrition rate, after third year of teaching, they usually change career. So it's unfortunate that teachers don't have the tools to take care and maintain their bodhicitta, their mind of love, because all teachers have that to care for the future. So there's a big part of it, being with children, being with parents as well, and teachers. So hearing about this and surrounding the theme of the ecological crisis, and for us going to the Paris COP21, where the agreement was that was the first time that the people from the spiritual background had a platform to be there in the presence of the politicians and the environmentalists and activists. And I remember so many people were surprised that we were there. They said, "What are you doing here? I mean, this is a science thing, a political thing." And we're like, "What do you mean? This is a human crisis, not just an ecological crisis." So we see bringing that voice there to let people know that they, humans as a family, as a species, we've lost connection to ourselves, to the environment, to Mother Earth as ourselves. So I think bringing that voice to the ecological crisis, which is, I think, under the umbrella of a spiritual or a human crisis. And that's why we run around and we consume and exploit and are violent to one another and to the environment. And so this is very related to environmental, racial, social justice. Once we teach, and this is what we want to reframe education, not as to produce more workers and employees and successful people, but to educate people their interconnection to all of life and to other people who look different, and to look at the environment differently. So we also involved with education to bring children outdoor, and to teach young people not to be afraid of getting dirty, to hug a bush, to hike, and to be uncomfortable in nature. And when they feel that connection with nature, then they can look at it differently. So this is my joy to be with you, Bhante, and Brother Lobsang. And it's thank you for your work, and I'm looking forward to learning how you're evolving education as well. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. I really love that we bow as respect when we chime in. I think it's really beautiful. So as we're talking about bowing in and out, I will bow out and hand over to Orla to continue with the in-depth insights to be gleaned from you, using her beautiful dulcet Irish tone. So over to you, Orla.
Thank you so much, dear Rahina. No pressure. So we had been thinking about how this conversation might go, and we thought we might start it to begin on a broader brushstroke to understand what were the challenges and the suffering that we were seeing that then inspired our response in terms of our own practice, of sharing our practice, and of moving towards specifically evoking it in education, that it took that form. So maybe I might begin with dear Lobsang, dear Genla. Would you mind sharing with us a little just about what you were seeing, what touched you, that it responded and grew into Jamze Getzel?
Sorry. I think my maybe inspiration is well, definitely, I was raised in a monastery, sent by my grandparents in a monastery. So I joke about this, but I think it's as more than a joke. I think it's a true. There sometimes two kinds of people go to the monastery. Some people are pretty enlightened and high up. Maybe the example would be Brother Phap Dung and Bhante B. But I was out of control. I was a very, very difficult child. The only hope my grandparents had was to sending me to the monastery for a couple of reasons. Of course, one is that they thought maybe the monastery is the only hope. Sometimes in our village they use that as a kind of tool to scare young boys. If you don't behave, we'll send you to the monastery. I don't think that is really a positive way of inspiring people to become a monk and learn about Buddha Dharma. But anyway, this is one thing. And I think in some ways they use that for me. But at the same time, and I think they were scared because they were aging and how I'm going to survive on this earth. They were responsible for my well-being, and they had a hope. Interesting was they had a hope and a faith in me. If you send him to the monastery, he will change and he will find a human in himself. So that was the whole journey that I grew up in a monastery, and I think all the childhood and young adults and all the memories are growing up in a monastery. And I don't live as a monk, but I think my heart is a monk. That is, I feel that I think something like maybe once you're a monk, you're always a monk. That's what I feel. Growing up in a monastery as an orphan, of course, it was one thing. I feel this now. My grandparents were pushing me to find the human in me, and go and find the human in you. You are really a wild, maybe animal. I don't know. They didn't say animal, but something very wild and undisciplined species in a human form. And we want you to find a human in me. And that was their assignment to me. Once I reached to the monastery under the great, compassionate and kind teachers, they helped me to find a purpose in that human. Finding human was a first job assignment. Then second assignment given by my teachers was to find a purpose of that human life. I'm still working on both, so don't assume that I achieved that. So I'm still kind of back and forth, and sometimes trying to find the human in me. And then when I feel, I found it, then I'm trying to figure it out. So what is the purpose of my life? So it's like all this. So connecting with the children and thinking about doing something with the children was something very intimate to me. It's not that I I know what I'm doing, and I have a means to build a children's community in this remote region of Himalaya. But it was something that I felt it is I'm trying to do both things. One, being with them, maybe being with them, working with them. I'm continuously searching the human in me, and I'm continuously seeking the purpose of this human in me. So this was I think the main inspiration. And I love, because I don't see any difference. It's not two separate things for me. My life and what I do. I love that I feel the same. There's no difference between these two. So this is a inspiration. I'm not sure, Orla, if I'm responding to your question directly, but.
Oh, so beautifully. Thank you so much, Genla. Your words reminded me of words from Thich Nhat Hanh that he would often share, that our own life has to be our message, that what we teach has to be who we are as well. And you are a beautiful example of that. So thank you so much for kind of setting the scene of your work so skillfully. And dear Bhante B, may I check in with you then about your experience in what suffering you saw and how you chose to take action in Uganda in this way. And as you said, drawing together these several different wisdom traditions in this unique pioneering way.
Yes, thank you very much. Actually, when I lived in Uganda here, there were so many wars, a lot of violence, and by the time I left for India in 1990 as an exchange student to go to study in India, I had really witnessed a lot of violence in the country. And of course, back then, there was no internet, but it was just physical exposure to the violence, wars, people dying, and people shot, and really people blitz. You find really somebody who's dead being shot at. And then, of course, this showed me that there is a reason, a big problem in the country. And after I did my meditation in India, and through meditation, for 12 days, I went to Toshita Monastery. And I'm not like Lobsang, who was sent to the monastery. Me, I had to find a monastery. I figured it out. So I wanted to be peaceful, and I went to Toshita Monastery near it's in Dharamsala in Makorganj, and I did a 12 days meditation retreat. And after that 12 days, it was very, very peaceful. I felt very peaceful inside me. And I said, wow, this is can help my fellow Africans. This practice of Buddhism and meditation can help my fellow Africans. And I was so excited because I was just new to the practice. I said, wow, I want to introduce it to the entire Africa. The entire Africa, I would like them to really practice this. And I went to His Holiness the Dalai Lama and asked him to bless me. I had a private audience with His Holiness the Dalai Lama, and I asked him two things. I would like to bless me, please, for the work ahead of me to start this in Africa. And then the second one, how do I do it? I wanted to get some wisdom. For the blessing, he said, yes, I will bless you. I was a layman back then. And then the second thing, second question, yes, he said, yes, I advise you to get friends. Look for friends. Here I am, I'm the only Ugandan in India who's interested in meditation. I said, where am I going to get friends? Yes, so I started to reach friends, and some of them, they didn't even understand what I was talking about. Later on my journey, I was telling people that I'm meditating. They said, oh, medication. They said, no, meditation. They said, oh, medication. So I knew that it's very tough for people to understand what I've learned. And when I came back to Uganda, long story short, one time I got the newspaper in Uganda. It was a newspaper, rarely newspaper, but that time I wanted to see what's in the society. After I've left a long time, I wanted to see the current society. When I got a newspaper, I found out that most of the things that were being written about in the newspaper was actually against moral principles, killing, raping, stealing, and so on. You know, what was in a newspaper was more advertising for cars and insurance, like small, it's like a footnote. The rest of the newspaper was just full of violence. And when I really started writing down what was written in the newspaper, I could trace any of the news in a newspaper on the 5 precepts, which broken, like killing, stealing, and all this. So now, and then I moved in this country, Uganda. I found out even children were throwing stones to the dogs. Then I asked them, what has the dog done? They said nothing. I said, why are you throwing a stone to the dog? So I found out the violence had pervaded the younger generation. I said, let me formulate a school whereby we can address this, and based on sound moral principles. And it's amazing that the first time I saw that, I told actually it was my nephew, was 11 years. I said, this, we should protect life out of loving kindness and compassion. He got it. And then we're just discussing, and then there was elderly people were throwing stones to rats and all this kind of thing. He stopped them. Please stop killing. Buddhists don't kill. So I say, wow, if this child can understand just with my teaching, and it's only 11 years, I can transform the new generation. And later on, I learned a caption. There's a caption that I learned, I think it's written by His Holiness the Dalai Lama, that if you can change, if you want to bring changes in one generation, you teach children how to meditate, 8-year children. Something to that effect. If you want to change the world or generation, in one generation, if you want to bring change, teach 8-year child to meditate. And that's why I started bringing children on board. I start teaching them mindfulness, and I can see children, sometimes they come from my preschool. They come and say, talk to me. I thought they're greeting me. They say, no. There's one child who killed a millipede. They come and report to me. But then when they come, I think that they're coming to greet me. And all of the time they say, after that, they say, there is one kid who just killed a millipede in our class. So I can see our work is very transformative. So that's what I'm doing now. Thank you very much.
Oh, thank you so much. That is so contagiously zestful, your passion and your joy in your great offering of your work. So, dear Thai Phap Dung, may I come to you to see what this has touched in you so far, and how you sense your own connection with suffering, or also you've been so lucky to have so many years of transmission from Thich Nhat Hanh. So you're there at the birth of Wake Up Schools to see how this energy formed this particular vessel. So maybe I can ask you to share a little on that.
Dear friends, for me, I'm a refugee from Vietnam, kind of like my teacher. He helped, he came to the West to try to end the war. And I'm a product of that war. And I'm in America. I grew up in America, came over when I was 8. So I've been educated in America, in the West. And I think growing up, when I became it was in college that I met our teacher and meditation. And through meditation and through the practice, it helped me take care of my suffering as a young person. So mainly I feel indebted to him because he helped me, gave me the tools to handle very emotion and reconcile with my father. So as a young person, that's what was going on with me. So that slowly led me towards the monastic path, and now, you know, I feel very inspired to bring that to other young people. That's why this education is important to me, but also to support the teachers who actually have to stand there and take care of young people, and how they also lack the tools to handle their emotions and their way. So to support children, to support teachers, and support the parents. So that's also another element in our, because, you know, they're very interconnected, because after school they have to come home. So we've done work in India. I've been to Bhutan to actually teach teachers as well, teachers training. So for me personally, it's feel indebted to our teacher to having helped me as a young person with the real mental tools, the mental training tools, to actually handle my emotion, handle my notions about my father, and to understand that is a notion, and that I don't have to be so angry with him all the time. And so for me, children, young people have that capacity to know that. So that's a more very practical, humane. I love the word humane education, teaching us how to be a human being, which is learning how to take care of our bodies and our emotion. And now with this ecological crisis and so on, I think children are beginning to be aware of this. So there's a little pressure, and there's a kind of like a kind of emptiness that, you know, the parents don't care, the governments don't care, the school, what are we doing, you know, with the whole movement with the student Fridays for the Future, led by a young student who didn't want to go to school. Why am I going to school if you don't care about my future? You know, and so this is a very important element for us to reframe education and what is its purpose. And for me, growing up and the education in America, I'm grateful for all my teachers that help wake me up in different ways. But also, you know, I saw the education made me become very competitive and very self-centered, thinking about my own benefit and so on. And going into the workplace with that kind of thing, it diminished who I was as a human being. I'm kind of generally, you know, generous and kind somewhat, but if you're not careful and you live in an environment where people are competitive, you become like that. So for me to teach young people to how to maintain that kind of meaning and purpose, I think our brother shared, is also important. And to reframe education is not producing more workers and employees or good citizen, but even question what is the whole purpose of life, as we've mentioned already. So for me, it's a little bit more radical questioning. And the other part I always use as a mantra is to teach children, to teach young people to love and to understand biology, to understand nature, the process, and to celebrate this, how we've evolved as a human species. And that wonder there is actually the medicine for the violence, for their loneliness. And it's the medicine for their disconnection to Mother Earth, to nature, and to other human beings who are maybe different, and not to be afraid of that. And so that's what I do in the monastery when we have teen retreat or family retreat. So we teach young people to understand what is that process of life in them. So that comes down to basically, why are you hitting this bush with the stick? You know, I take care of young boys, and I let them make their own stick and use it as staff, and how to hug a bush rather than hit it. It's like, what happens when you tear a leaf? So very practical things as well. So they begin, or ants. We all gather around a bunch of ants and see, like, what are they doing? So that kind of curiosity, all young people have. It's just reframing that so that it's not something that they, out of habit they do. So I just share with you just a little bit in general why I'm inspired, and also what the things I do, like in detail with children.
Yeah, that's wonderful. Thank you. Thank you so much. And when Genla had shared that his grandparents had sent him to the monastery, and you were saying that in the monastery you deal with problem children, especially to play and be with them, I was like, how great. You two are a perfect match together. And when you shared, Phap Dung, about how the school system tends to make us highly individualistic, highly competitive, we really care about kind of the independent republic of us, with the ecological crisis requiring a response that is exactly the opposite of all of that, thinking as a community, taking action collectively. Like, how do you think education can support widening or reframing, or completely coming up with a new view?
Yeah. Thank you for that question. When I was in Paris, COP21, and I listened, I attended some of the things, and just watching people go up there, very, they're scientists, activists, politicians, and I felt there's like there's some heart, some warmth missing a little bit. There's a lot of care, and there's a lot of very critical how to solve this. But I think that with education is we have to be very careful in terms of producing successful people. It's that kind of mentality that we think we can solve everything is actually what gets us in trouble, right? And I think from us, our teachers emphasize on how to fall in love with nature, and it's from that warmth, that interbeing, that connection. So it's just they're trying to balance how to like help developing countries, how to balance, all this stuff. And, there's always people coming to like with different arguments. And it's just really, if you ever go to this conference, it's it's that same kind of mentality that, it's not coming from that deep understanding of interbeing. And that's the key thing, to know that the environment is us, that people who are in the southern nations who are like developing, who are, getting the butt of this ecological crisis is us. So our willingness to help is not to balance what is fair and where it is, but to see them as us, to see other people in other parts that like the climate is more challenging. So for me, fundamentally in education is to teach that to young people, to have them feel that. So rather than just using the thinking mind, to actually for them to feel that. And I've witnessed this, and it hurts me to meet young people in the beach, for instance, seeing two young people and they see me coming and they see that, oh, I'm bald and I look different. And the way they're cold and they close, and they're just children. And normally children are actually very open, but our education is very suspicious of those who are different. Or so that connection, I think for me in education, we need to bring more of and I think meditation helps, mindfulness helps, because it's a lot of training to teach children to be intuitive, to feel, and that comes from being with themselves first. So in education, in our monasteries, we have the Thais calligraphy, be beautiful, be yourself. So that as a basis. So we teach young people, because they all have pain and suffering from their own upbringing and family. So we learn to teach them to care for themselves, to understand themselves, and to love themselves. That as a basis from them to move on and to be involved in other social, ecological, and other issues that they care about. So I hope, that answers your question, or I just share with you, I think, what's important in education.
Yeah, beautiful. Thank you so much. And speaking about supporting children to connect with their bodies and to care for themselves and to recognize what they're feeling first, maybe Genla, could I come to you next, because you had the opportunity to build a residential home school mini society, and you literally were able to build it on the principles of love and compassion. So can I ask you for your thoughts on the challenges that specifically come from the ecological crisis, from maybe our disconnection with the earth, from our sense of despair that sometimes comes up, and how, as educators, we can be with children, young people, adults, and support their hearts so that they can be they can feel hope, they can take appropriate action, they can take care of this part of earth, which is their own body.
Thank you, Ola. I will try. I believe, I think, when we, Brother Phap Dung was saying that, you know, the problem we have today is we have these pretty powerful leaders sitting there, and they do not have really a holistic perspective about when we talk about ecological. And everybody understands they do have their own agenda, even when they talk about ecological crisis. And I think there is so little that we can do. What we have a hope now is to educate the future generation. And I think hope is there. You know, maybe in our generation also, we can, so little we can do to make a change in transformation that we expect. But I think if we could educate the younger generation, and I think that's the hope lies. And so it so much is dependent on how we educate that I believe. When we think about the entire ecological system, I think the very important, the first that we understand, the ecological system of one's own being also. You know, I'm thinking, so what we talk about, the three essentials of our children's community, Chamsaka's children's community, the three essentials are educating heart, mind, and body. What we see the modern education system is so much focused on human thinking. We completely ignored human feelings and human emotion. There is an ecological crisis happening in every being. You see the mental health situation today that we look in the younger generation is a suicide is a fourth leading the cause of the death in the world. At once, and at the same time, we talk about the world is progressing, we are growing, we are developing, and education is we are talking, and we measure education, success of education in terms of, you know, somebody going in a space and how fast our trains are moving and how fancy computer we can build. But at the same time, that education is becoming, maybe question mark, is the cause of the biggest cause of the death of the younger generation. I think I'm just saying something, maybe provocative things, but I think it requires some serious reflection on what's happening in our education system. So the Brother Phap Dung is saying is like, if we cannot emphasize, equal emphasis on our feeling and emotions, then definitely there is going to be a crisis. And within us, when there's a crisis within us, and we, you know, there's going to be a crisis within entire planet. Mm. That is, I think, you know, where we talk educating heart, basically totally heart aspect of the compassion as a nurturing. Mm. And that feeling part is becoming so important to I think, include in a curriculums of education. Now I'm getting distracted. I think I'll stop here.
Yeah, that's great. I thought it was a beautiful similarity to what Bhante B has shared about, witnessing children throwing stones at dogs. That, you're seeing this lack of connection or this lack of empathy or the delusion of being separate very, very, very young. And so I wonder, Bhante B, if there's anything that's already been shared that you'd like to expand on, or what it's touched in you, specifically around how we can provide places of learning that feel safe and hopeful and joyous, and respond to the crisis, bigger crisis, internal crisis, many crises.
Yes, I think all the speakers are really, what they have shared is just amazing. Whatever they have talked resonate with me. Probably I would give my 2 cents, really maybe explain it in a different way, but it's the same thing basically. Yes, when I look at my inspiration about environment, really, I attended, I was not a good environmentalist actually. I remember going to Tibet in 1996. I was in Tibet in a very beautiful lake. And for some reason, I threw something. I ate a chocolate and I threw it out of the window. And there were so many people in the car, the Canadians, American people, they screamed at me. I said, what have I done wrong? So that's 1996. I didn't really connect very well to the environment. Yes, I felt so ashamed. I felt so terrible that I could throw something, a pepper, which is eating chocolate, and throw it out of the window in a very clean environment like that. So through meditation, of years of meditation, I start connecting with the environment. And those who have read my book, I talk about physical environment. That's the physical outside. Then there's a social environment, we human beings, spiritual environment. So most of the things that I see people focusing on, after attending even 3 conferences, COP in Denmark, I attended the United Nations Climate Change on a civil society, not with a politician. Then in Germany, I attended the COP. I don't remember the number, but I attended also there, again on a civil society. Then in Marrakesh is in Morocco, I attended one. In Marrakesh, I told the people who were just talking about physical environment, reducing carbon emission by 30% by 2030. Everybody was going about carbon emissions. I told them, no, we need to really look at reducing carbon grid emissions by 30%, 2030. Heart rate emission by 2030, we should reduce that by 30%. Delusion emissions, 30% by 2030, we should reduce that. Really, that was my talk about how to reduce greed, hatred, delusion, and mental defilement that are all behind all the ecological crisis. So now, what I found out, really, in addressing these issues as part of the education system here, I developed this model of really looking at the students having their national curriculum, which trains their head and their intelligence. So I really introduced a few things that can bring some kind of interrelatedness, interconnection. And because I saw that people were so disconnected. And that's why the ancient teachings in India, we talk about yoga. Yoga, it's come from the verb yungati, means to unite, union of the body and the mind and the spirit. You can even add on the list, but okay, let us unite the body and mind. So we cannot only train the mind, we need to train the body. We cannot train only the body, we got to train the mind. So we cannot only take care of the physical aspect of the environment, we have to take about the social aspect of the environment. So now our school, then I try to merge the 3 things. One is the national curriculum, which of course I cannot ignore. But then I talk about the early Buddhist teaching on interdependent, what we call dependent origination, what Thich Nhat Hanh, Venerable Thich Nhat Hanh talk about interbeing. I talk about dependent origination, interconnectedness, interrelatedness, because that's where I see most people really are disconnected, and that's why they're unable to take care of the environment. So I introduce that in our education system, and of course from Buddhist teaching, when this is, that is, when this is not, that is not, when this arises, that arises, when this ceases, that ceases. Some teaching from early Buddhist teaching I introduced in our school, and then I say, well, these are people in Africa. What can we do to really translate that teaching into our African teaching? I found out the teaching of Ubuntu. In Uganda, we call it Ubuntu, but in South Africa, we call Ubuntu. So wherever you go in Africa, this word actually is there. Literally means people. And whenever you do something good, you say, oh, this person is alive. Is a live person, literally. Or this person is alive. In other words, you have human qualities. So now I start really teaching this from preschool, really see the interconnection between the environment and themselves. I tell them, those trees you are seeing, they're the external lungs. It's external lungs. You have internal lungs and you have external lungs. So now I ask them, now when you breathe out, always when I teach them, I say, now breathe in, breathe out. And now they give the air to the external lungs. And the external lungs give them air. I see the children learn biology, but they can't see that interconnection until they meditate on it, So then I introduced the concept of Ubuntu and African moral laws, and really teaching them about mindfulness. Now we have things like Moringa projects, like to plant the trees you see there's a lot of deforestation, but here we can reforestate. So I teach them how to plant trees. Preschool, on environment day, they plant trees. And now they take care of the physical environment. How they take care of the social environment is through meditation. And that's because the people who are destroying this environment is because they don't take care of the mind. So then mind training is very, very important in our school, because that's where the problem comes from. All these carbon emissions and all the things is coming from not really understanding how the physical environment is related to the social environment. So really we have that going on. We have, of course, mind training. I agree with you that mind and heart training is very important through mindfulness. Then, of course, we really look at happiness in our school, because really it's very, very important people to know the purpose of life. I had a workshop here and asked people, do you know the purpose of life? They just look at me. The purpose of life? No, there's no purpose. Other people say it's purposeless. Others say, by asking that question, that's the purpose of life. So now I include the H as part of our school motto training, is that people should know that we are doing this for the ultimate happiness, and they can find a meaning to life. And that's really kind of answer the question about existential crisis, because most people have this existential crisis and they lose the meaning and purpose of life. So we want to train our children from the day one, they know, why am I here? Otherwise, they lose purpose of life, then they cannot protect the environment. They cannot protect themselves. So for us, again, it's just really looking at about how there's interconnection of all of us, trees, animals, human beings, everything. That's where I think we need to emphasize on education, because it's disconnected. It's about getting degree and then get a job and then live your life. I mean, early learners, I don't think they learn that way. Like people who learned 200 years ago or 100 years ago, they learn for the interest. Mm-hmm. But people now these days, they just learn quickly to go through the education system, get a degree, get a job, and then like that. So for me, I just feel that education should be holistic and include everything that the other colleagues have talked about. Thank you very much for listening.
Thank you so much. And I love that all three of our luminaries, you're all such gardeners. There's, each of you has a garden or a happy farm in your neighborhood. When children and teenagers and young people come, they learn to physically grow and connect with the soil. I really appreciate the emphasis on our whole being, on allowing human beings to learn how to be whole and include all of themselves, so that we can live a life that has meaning, and that we're connected with that from a very young age. So may I hand over to my dear sister in the Dharma, Rahina, to continue the conversation.
Rahina bowing in. Thank you, Ola. Well, we could carry on with this, can't we? I mean, I think it's just beautiful, this idea of gardening, this idea of us being connected to the earth. I want to go into this aspect because for many of us, this work that you've been relating to relates first from an individual perspective, how we transform ourselves. And in transforming ourselves, we also transform the world around us. But often, you know, people say, and we do in Western sense, use the term ethics, the ethics of being, ethics of something, the rights and wrongs of what can and what can't be done. In Buddhism, this concept ethics means something very different. And I was wondering from your perspective, and we'll start with this because some of you have alluded to this concept, the Buddhist ethical principles. So maybe from your perspective of this holistic human being, what is it that in Buddhism can help us cultivate what is known as Buddhist ethics? So maybe a little bit about what do you see as Buddhist ethics, and how is that cultivated through the education system, or can it be cultivated in our educational system? And maybe I will go, don't think we've heard, I'm not sure who to choose. I feel like I want to spotlight someone. Maybe we'll go to Genla, Lobsang.
Thanks, Shaina. I am not sure if I feel confident enough to represent the Buddhist ethics, but nevertheless, again, you know, of course, my philosophy where I grew up and education has been received in a monastery, but I still don't want to say this is what I think the Buddhist ethics should be. What I think is anything you do, you think, you say, if it's harmful to you and others, is unethical. And I think it should go beyond the self. You know, anything that you say or you do or you think, any actions through your, you know, heart, mind, body, or the speech, which is harmful to yourself and others, is unethical. And anything that we could do, say, or think, you know, which are not harmful, which are beneficial for self and others, would be maybe the ethics that I feel maybe the more ethical thing to do. As my thinking. So I'll end here.
That sounds very insightful, Genla. I just want to touch a little bit that really what I seem to be hearing you saying is that really the basis of this basis of living ethically is almost a sense of causing no harm, and it builds very much in terms of your model of education, which is it's built on or is encompassed in your model. It's built very much on compassion and care as well, right? Love and compassion and care. So that seems to be quite woven into the do no harm aspect.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, like sometimes when we think about the, you know, the harmful behaviors or the, you know, the bad karmas, often we think in a relationship, maybe they're hurting or harming to the more sentient being. And we as a Buddhist, we don't think maybe throwing plastic in your neighborhood may not think as a bad karma, or maybe chopping down a tree, maybe it's okay. You know, they're not sentient being. So I encourage the Dharma teachers to maybe preach your followers, say it is a bad karma to throw the plastics. It's a bad karma to really chop trees, and it is bad karma to maybe not clean your place, or it is also bad karma to not clean your dishes or something like that. So we in the community, we have this practice of turning the community into zero waste community. And we talk about that, you know, the throwing plastic or throwing trash is a bad karma, and it's not ethical. It's very unethical. So from the very simple practice, I would say, you know, whatever we do. And yes, you're right, Rahina, you could now, you know, push that into a higher level of practice.
Thank you, Genla. I want to turn to what you've said, Bhante Buddharakkhita, Bhante B, on, you know, in Western schools, this concept that you've alluded to, or you've introduced in Uganda, around this love, this care, this ethic, this illusion of separateness, and helping people awaken to this, awaken from this illusion of separateness or lack of connection, or awaken to connectedness. That's quite rare in the Western education model for something like that to be introduced. How have you managed to factor that into Uganda, which follows very much a sort of Western type of pedagogical type of school model? So how do you affect change of that in the current education system, bringing that ethicality into a Western education paradigm?
Yes, thank you very much. Actually, that's again connected to ethics. We don't practice ethics alone. We practice ethics in connection with others. So now then what I do is to explain people, instead of in black and white, wrong and right, this kind of bad and good in terms of ethics. I explain to them in terms of what's skillful and unskillful, what's wholesome and unwholesome. I go a little bit further than my colleague Lobsang, is when I'm explaining this connection, it has to be in terms of ethics, because that's what they're going to practice. So we look at, instead of saying this wrong, this right, this bad, this good, with the Buddhist framework of ethics, helps me to really bring that connection with the people here and the school children. So now we look at two principles in terms of Buddhist ethics to bring that connection. One is motivation. What's the motivation behind what you're doing? Let us call that motivation principle, your intention. And we look at consequential principles. What are the results of what you're doing? So now with the motivation, we look at what are you, when you're doing something, what's motivating you? Then once we find out if the motivation is greed, hatred, delusion, and fear, that's unwholesome, that's unskillful. Please try to transform that to what is skillful and wholesome. So now, then the opposite of that motivation principle is when we're doing something out of generosity, and I teach that within African context, how to give. When you give, you receive also. For instance, when we talk about generosity, I talk about not generosity about only living, material things. We talk about generosity of space. I use the word stream. Stream as what we call an acronym. So we need to give space. People are competing with space. I think, Brother Fang, you have been to Uganda. Yes, people are always competing in space, and then they cause accident. They're not connected to each other because they're always fighting for space. But if they give space, then we know we consider others, you know. We are not separated from others, but we are interdependent. So I need to give space so that you can pass. But what I see here, people don't give space. And then have you heard about road rage? Maybe you have it in America. So because they are not generous. So then I tell them you should have that motivation to be generous of your space, of your time, or respect others, then effort, volunteer, come to the temple and volunteer, and then attention, pay attention, be generous when somebody's talking, pay attention. So then there's a connection in terms of ethics there about motivation principle. Material things. So STREAM stands for space, time, respect, energy or effort, and attention, and material things. So I tell them to be generous. So that's what it is. Now with the loving, when it comes to, sorry about my light because it's dark here. Yeah, then again with the motivation, I talk about what's your motivation, loving kindness, compassion. Then I teach them. And that's always relational. In other words, my teaching here, our teaching in Africa context is always a relation, so that there's a connection between oneself and others. Then I say, how are you going to connect? Let us send loving kindness, starting with oneself, my teachers, my relatives, my friends, difficult people, and then to all beings. So it's compassion. Then I go to delusion. The opposite of delusion is wisdom and understanding. Then I teach about them the interconnection. Wisdom wisdom or understanding is based on understanding about the interconnectionness. Ubuntu. You are because I am because you are. So then I teach them like that. And then courage, I teach them. So then I give them a template whereby I tell them on one side is skillful, on one side is unskillful. The unskillful side is the one which is motivated by greed, hatred, delusion, and fear. On a wholesome state, which is skillful ways, is actually something motivated by generosity, loving kindness, compassion, wisdom, and courage. That's one aspect. Then another aspect, which is actually Lobsang alluded to, is called consequential principles. When I do something, let me check in. What I'm doing, what are the consequences of what I'm doing? Is it harmful, bring suffering and pain and stress to oneself, to others, and both? It has to meet that criteria. And now, when it's something you are doing is harmful to oneself, others, and both, that's unskillful, that's unwholesome. Then, on the other side of what is wholesome and skillful is what you do that leads to happiness, joy, oneself, others, and both. That's skillful. So now from that ethics, that really brings a lot of foundations for builds a very good foundation for people to connect with others and environment based on that. And that's what really we do here. Instead, what I found out, most of the people here, when I connected with them, especially the youth, they know something bad or good because somebody said it. If something bad or good, who said it? God. Who said it? My parents. So they don't have a psychological framework to really put these things into perspective. So now that brings a whole transformation. I mean, I give you an example. One time I was coming from the States, and then I found a car to bring me to the temple from the airport. Then once I sat in the car, somebody, the driver told me, I was trying to look for my seat belt. What is the seat belt? They said, no, don't worry. I said, no, I need to put on my seating belt. He said, don't worry, there's no police. Now, this is a person who's putting on a seat belt because there's a police. So this is how people maintain ethics here, because somebody said, because there's a policeman, that's why somebody would be motivated to put on a seatbelt. But actually, when you look at it, when you look at the principle that I give them, then they say, okay, you have to put on a seatbelt because of the safety, because it's unskillful. And I explain them like that. So many things. That's just a classic example to show you how people don't know the distinction between what's skillful and unskillful. And in Buddhist teaching and African wisdom, I try to explain them very well so that they can really see that connection. Thank you very much, Rahim.
Thank you very much, Bhante Buddharakkhita. Just to let everyone know that in the greeting in South Africa is Sawubona, and that Sawubona is I see you. When you greet someone, you see them, and you see them in all the dimensions of themselves. I see you as you are. I see your history. I see your ancestry. So this greeting is a long greeting. And in response, the person responds by saying, Sikona, I am seen. I've been seen. So this connection of Ubuntu is even manifested in the greeting of this interconnection, and the society shapes our humanity, and our humanity shapes and we shape the humanity in our society. So it's coming back to this ethics. But I want to go slightly off piste with you, Brother Phap Dung. We talk a lot about wholesome and unwholesome thinking and skills and activities that may be skillful and unskillful. And that really what we glean from some of what Lobsang and Bhante B has said is some of these behaviors are also governed by the environment that we live in. So coming to a lot you've mentioned yourself at the beginning, that a lot of the environment around us is actually promoting this view, this dualistic view that I am independent, that I am competitive, that to survive someone else or to succeed someone else must fail. So a lot of that thinking is inculcated in the educational system. How do you think we can, as influence some of that system? Because it's very easy to say, well, I can be skillful, but my environment is unskillful, and therefore I'm drawn into that way of being. What are your thoughts as to how, as parents and educators, we may be able to deal with that? It's a really long, complex question. So, and I know it's early, so apologies.
I won't attempt to answer that very specifically, but just inspired by everything that's been shared. I just feel very the message is there. I mean, for me, what guides me in terms of what is right and wrong is actually the basic teaching, the Four Noble Truths, is like, what is the suffering here? And so for me, it's always comes back to that, because only when someone who has not learned how to take care of their own suffering, will they cause suffering? Will they actually be judgmental, be competitive, be self-centered? Because even these leaders of our nations are like, you dig down deep into it, some childhood thing, and as you study in some of the world leaders that have caused so much pain in the on our human history, you look at their history, it's very basic. Or all the politicians who are around a table, it's because they haven't dealt with their ego, so their pride is up there, and that can cause a decision that will cause so much war. So anyway, this is what you look at the history of the Vietnam War in terms of what is right and wrong. It is basically you look at the education of McNamara, as Howard Zinn. I've learned from him and his analysis of some of the basic human error in the personality involved in the war that caused so much destruction to our country was very, very fundamentally that person couldn't handle their pride. So coming back to that is a suffering, and people don't recognize that in education. Your arrogance comes from a tightness of you not accepting your own vulnerability, how you were treated when you were a child and you were ashamed. So you're arrogant. I'm just giving you an example of some of the things I've come across. And so it comes down to the what is the suffering here in this person who is causing suffering? So for me, in terms of right and wrong, ethics and stuff, the guiding light for me is not right and wrong. It's like, where is the suffering? And if we can understand in this complex back and forth on who's right and wrong, I think the common thing that will tide us and transcend right and wrong is that we fundamentally, are suffering. And then actually we all want to relieve that. So this interbeing, this the tying. So very fundamental for me is to teach the young people, to teach teachers, to learn how to take care of their suffering from their upbringing, from their environment, from the culture, and so on. And this is crucial in our, I think, evolution as a human. How we've treated suffering, we've ignored it, we've taken medicine, we're going to, all these ways to not deal with our suffering. This is, I feel, what our role is, to make the environment, the school and the teachers, to actually address and say it's okay to suffer. It's okay to be sad. Let's look into it. Let's be with it. So for me, that is that's what I do in my work. Of course, there's joy, there's celebration, there's thriving, there's meaning. But I always, that's the third and the fourth truth. But for me, something in our culture in general, this modern culture, is actually we hide and we shift away suffering. And for me, my teacher, how he helped me is the first time he helped me to sit down and look at my anger towards my father and see how that works. And I think in realizing and understanding that, it's like, actually, my dad also suffered, was the motivation for everything I do now, is because my teacher woke me up to that and recognizing that. And it's like, why do I continue to hold on to this smelly fish in my mind about my father? And young people don't see this. And so they continue to be competitive, to be not think of other people who you're exploiting. And that selfishness comes from actually having not being comfortable with their upbringing, their sadness and loneliness, learning how to take care of that. I just want to share in terms of ethics. I just share a beautiful story. It is very because people look to us as authority in knowing what and right and wrong. So a teen camp, we have many teenagers come and they have difficulty. One child felt left out and he smashed the glass window of one of our meditation hall, and so all the boys, they wanted to punish, and they go like, so I gather all of them and we had a discussion. It's like, what is going on here? But they all look to me to say what is right and wrong. But I always throw it back and use that as an opportunity to say, what is going on? And then we dug deeper into it, And so, they said, we were not letting him join us. They shunned him. So he felt angry. And so this was discussed. Every teenager, a young boy, got to share their perspective. And so we began to look at, so I use that as an opportunity, not as right and wrong, because that's what they go to, but actually use that situation to see to feel how they can all feel what he must have felt to be isolated, to not be part of the group. And he started to see that they understood him. And so that was the part of understanding the suffering. What is going on with the situation? And then the next part is like, what are we going to do about it? And that was amazing because they were trying to figure out whose fault it was. And this is a good example of what's going on with the environmental crisis. It's like, whose fault is this? And so we looked into that and we saw that actually they're all related. And you can't separate who is the perpetrator and who is, because they're all very connected. So we came out of the situation and they all agreed to it. And I don't want to make it too long, but they came out that they would all be banned from the monastery, all of them and their families from the monastery from coming for 2 months. That's what they agreed to. And they came that as a group. And when I came out, and the parents all came, so what happened? And I told the parents that they're all your whole family, all of you are banned from the monastery for 2 months. I mean, that's not my decision. It's the children, but the parents. You've seen, it's like that's not fair. My child had nothing to do with it. So that immediately, you see the adult mind. The children came up with this, that they saw the interbeing, that we're all co-responsible for what happened, why the glass was broken and why his hand was bleeding. And it's not linear as we all thought, but I wish I recorded that discussion. There was so much wisdom when you remove the authority and let the people look at the suffering. But anyway, I just share with you that is a little anecdote, but it is actually what I hear is going on around the table and negotiating whose fault with this environmental. It's really, really. I mean, it puts. I put children. They are so wise if we allow them the space to deal with and look at suffering. And for me, I'm a facilitator, and teachers should be facilitator and not be authority. And I think that's I know I didn't answer your question. I'm sure I did not answer your question, but I just feel in terms of right and wrong, we have to be very careful because they are very connected. No mud, no lotus. The good, the bad, happiness and suffering coexist. And our culture, we want to get rid of the suffering and just but we don't know that there's a cost. There's people being exploited. Your trash is going somewhere. Where is it going? But we don't know. We don't want to know. Yes,
Sorry,
exactly. It's the new dumpster, Africa. Asia has refused American trash now. And, all of China and America is looking to Africa. But anyway, I don't, it's this, again, for me, my guiding thing is not very complicated. Where is the suffering? Can we understand it? And through that process, I think the way, it's not right and wrong, but the way forward together, not excluding and not blaming, not punishing, is revealed. That's just the basic formula of what our Indian teacher many hundreds of years ago discovered. It's nothing complicated about it. But now anyway, I just stop here.
Thank you, Brother Phap Dung. I think I'll weave over. I know this is a topic close to Ola's heart, education and educators, and you touched a little bit on that, Brother Phap Dung. But there is a question in the chat. So those of you who are not aware, there are questions in the chat, and we're weaving it into the conversation as we speak. And I really would like Ola to pick this question up because, as I said, she's so involved with educators, and I think it will be lovely to hear this in her voice.
Thank you so much, Rahina. And may I say, it's so great to see. I looked through our participant list. It's so great to see so many people from our Happy Teachers Sanghas here. So we create communities where teachers can practice together, nourish themselves, support each other, deepen our practice. And when Bhante B was sharing the advice from His Holiness the Dalai Lama of find some friends, that's very much what we try and do, because one teacher on their own can make a lot of impact, but teachers together, happy teachers change the world. So one of our happy teachers, Jost, who has shared that he's finding the motivations and ethics very inspiring, and he says that he is a teacher and he facilitates a new education sangha. Yay! And his question is, what skills do you think educators have to practice for themselves, for ourselves, to be nourished enough to contribute to this kind of change that we're talking about? So maybe, Phap Dung, can I begin with you and then maybe come over to Bhante B to share that? So what kind of nourishment, what kind of trainings and skills do teachers need for themselves? What kind of practice do they need to do to be able to hold these kind of spaces?
Yeah, I'll just quickly share that when I work with teachers is to teach them to be get out of the teacher mind, because sometimes you have a lot of pressure. So to find time to actually sit while you're in school or at home, to actually, to care for yourself, and the meditation, coming back to your breath, to your body, very practical stuff. And walking meditation is another practice that I usually share. And a teacher, I think I think our teachers shared about it. After a retreat, the teacher really adopted walking meditation, and I share you this image. It's very beautiful. So his method before, to when he walks into the class, is to try to settle all the student. But after the retreat, this teacher adopted and made a contract with him, from the door to his desk, he would walk in mindfulness. Simply that. And he shared it in the letter, so that's why it's famous now. So he walks very differently now. He enters the room after the retreat. One step, one breath. So you can imagine, one step, one breath. And all the students are very rowdy and very loud. And they look over and they know that there's something going on here. So naturally, they begin to be curious and they begin to be quiet. So he sits down and he stays focused. So in the practice of meditation of following your breath, following your step, sitting down in a different way. So he was applying the practice to take care of himself in that moment first, rather than trying going in there and to try to control the student. So it's rehabituating his way, right? So for me, that is a clear example of what sometimes we as teachers, we have habits and we think they work and we try really hard, and it puts a lot of, and that's why we burn out, because of our own, of our own habits. So each teacher, through meditation, through mindfulness, awareness of stopping and taking care of our body, you begin to see for yourself what you need to adjust. Where are your weaknesses? Where are your habitual habit, the things that you turn to that deplenish you, that take away your energy? So you have to switch it. That's what we do in the monastery. We train to change one habit with another. So as teachers, we try to program the way how they learn to be a teacher, authority, listen, controlling, and all that. That's an actual harmful thing, to control your class, So we try to remove a lot of that and then treat them as human beings, teachers. And to show vulnerability to your classroom is another kind of switching of habit. The teachers have to know what the answer to everything to be in control. We also tell teachers, show them your suffering. Let them know that you're struggling right now. Let them know that you're sweating right now, that you don't know what to do because things are out of control. And then the students begin to see. That's what I call embodied practice. You actually become real with your students. So for me, that becomes a very nourishing environment for you to come into as a teacher. That's more sustainable when you enjoy coming in and seeing your kids and knowing that they know you and they know you're suffering. Anyway, it's kind of a little bit radical because not all teachers want to be vulnerable. Anyway, I just add a little bit some of the sustainable things that I teach teachers.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much. And Bhante B, then, in terms of skills that educators can practice for themselves to support themselves in supporting so many other hearts and minds,
Right.
What would you advise?
Right. Thank you very much. Yes, I have about 4 kinds of advice that I feel that have helped me a lot as a teacher, ranging from teaching children here in Uganda. I go there to preschool sometime. I teach meditation to them. I love teaching children the Carbon Sunday, and we have the youngest one. So, and I teach from that level, really. We're talking about 3-year children, and to the level of graduate students, where I teach at Union Theological Seminary in New York, where I teach attached to Columbia University. So I've just finished teaching there in January. So the range of the people I can see that I teach, and I am going to share what helps me actually when I teach. One is learning from students. Really, if you develop that curiosity and really see how much, I mean, for me, even I tell my students, like, I've learned a lot from you, actually. I've taught you definitely, but I've shared what the Lord Buddha taught and what a little bit I know, but I've learned from you. Really, I learned a lot, ranging from a 3-year-old child to grad students. It feeds into the system and I don't get exhausted. Otherwise, I'll be so exhausted. It's some of the teaching I do at Spirit Rock, at IMS. I have to travel away from Uganda. By the time I reach there, I'm jet lagged and all that. But really knowing that actually as I'm teaching, I'm learning also something through even the way they ask questions. You get to learn from the way somebody has put the question. Really, yeah. So that learning, developing that curiosity to learn from the students, it really feeds into the system. So
Yeah.
it rejuvenates you.
And I love that actually all three of you, and you were coming on as our teachers, our luminaries, and all three of you shared that what you were looking forward to about today was about learning. So it seemed like such a good symptom. It was such a good sign. When all of you said it, I was like, this is going to be good. They're great. So back to you.
Yes, I've learned a lot. Okay, another thing that really I feel that rejuvenates me is have a community like-minded people, you know, and I think this forum is very, very important to keep on going, because really knowing, I didn't know the work you're doing. So really, as a teacher, it really feeds into my system. Really, I feel more energized and inspired doing that, connecting. In other words, having network of different teachers doing similar things. That's one thing that teachers should do. And that comes from the whole tradition, where the Buddha was asked by Veneranda whether the holy life is a spiritual friend is just half a holy life. The Buddha said, no, the entire spiritual life is a spiritual friendship. So having that friendship with teachers like now, as we are doing, that helps. Another one is called self-care. Self-care or spiritual care is when you go to teach. Like sometime I used to teach in Brazil for 1.5 months. I would go back to United States in IMS Forest Refuge. I'll have 1 month of really taking care of myself. Right? That's very, very important. Because we take care of so many people. And if we forget to take care of ourselves, then we get what we call compassion fatigue. Not a good idea. Now, the fourth one is called practicing the 4 kindfulness. 4 kindfulness, that means loving kindness, compassion, appreciative joy, and equanimity. Yes, sometimes when you teach and people do quite the opposite and say, wow, I've spent all my time, really. Sometimes even you give a talk for 2 hours and somebody asks you a question. No, you haven't talked about how to overcome this. So if you're having compassion, having equanimity, and I mean, sometimes you can even teach and somebody do quite the opposite after teaching them for almost 2 months. So you must have compassion, loving kindness, equanimity, and all this kind of thing. Lastly, but not the least, it should be the number 1, practicing the 4 foundational mindfulness. Mindfulness of the body, mindfulness of feelings, but especially mindfulness of emotions. Because as you teach, as a teacher, it's always people ask you questions. But if you don't know, you have not taken care of your emotions, then you may feel even ridiculed. You may feel insufficient. You might, I mean, it kind of evokes so many emotions and feelings. So we learn how to handle that. So then really then you can deal with this kind of noble vocation. Teaching, actually, as a teacher, is a noble thing. It's amazing when I find somebody and I taught them like 10 years ago, then they write to me, you know, Bhante, Now even I'm taking a master's degree in Buddhism because you are the one who taught me something. So you see, we really touch people's hearts and minds. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. So, Rahina, is there another question? Do we have time for one more? I'm conscious of.
Yes, I think we have one more, and I'd like to take that. But I was just about to rain on your parade, Bhante B, just to let you know. I was just about to rain on your parade when you stopped. So sorry. So coming to the last question, I know there's a lot that's on the chat, and some of them are quite tactical around books and guidance and all of that. And in our follow-up, we will address some of that, hopefully with some resources. But the final question for today is something I'd like to turn over to you, Genla, is, you know, we've been talking a lot about, because you have both in the community, both looking after children, but also teaching them. You know, and often we, you know, and it's an ability to therefore integrate into the school some of these ethical principles that we're talking about. In what might be your guidance be to those for us who are in educational systems in the West, where there is a full separation of you know, some of these qualities that you bring into schools from the educational curricula and ways of teaching, ways of educating in the West? What advice and guidance might you give us?
Okay, Raina, thank you. So I will definitely come back to you, but I was so much deeply thinking and listening about two venerables about talking about the, you know, specific the skills mother teachers need to cultivate on that. And I think that even that me as a teacher in this community that I live here, I live with the children and 24/7, and this is a more than teacher is, I act like their parents. And these are the questions which I think I myself struggle a lot in over 18 years. And one important thing that I believe, and I'm not suggesting anybody this is the right way to do, is the building relationship with the children. Now, the relationship, when I'm talking a totally different. I talk about building imperfect relationship. The problem that we talk about today is the teachers are burning out and they cannot continue for a long time, is there is a unrealistic expectations is set up in our society. Teachers cannot be wrong. Teachers has to be perfect. Teachers has to have all right answer. That is the biggest lie and unrealistic expectations we set up. And of course, nobody can actually do this job and remain in this service for a long time. So the most important thing is is building that imperfect relationship, accepting that, embracing that. I am imperfect, you are imperfect. Two imperfect people have a greatest intention in the greatest service of the humanity. And that means the acceptance with the commitment of no matter what, I will never let it go. I will never let you down. I will never give up on you. Is, I think, one of the most important the skills in a school environment has to build. And Bhante Ji used here the term, I know the compassion fatigue. And I dislike this term because I know somewhere in the West they generate. It is not the fatigue we generate practicing love and compassion. This is a fatigue of unrealistic expectation, not the compassion fatigue. Compassion will never exhaust you. Compassion will never drain your energy. Compassion will rejuvenate your inner energy. We all know this, who people at least attempt to practice love and compassion. Whenever, even moment when we think of the compassion, it lights up. It will never drain you. But people are scared of talking. Did you ever heard of the greed fatigue? There is a greed fatigue. There is a violence fatigue. Mm-hmm. Nobody wants to talk because it's dangerous for business. People don't want to discourage practicing greed and fear. There is a fear fatigue in a younger generation. I'm, behind. I need to catch up. I need to do better. I need to have a bigger car. I need to have more money in my bank account. These are the disease in our society, actually draining everybody's energy, not the compassion. There's no compassion fatigue. There's no love fatigue. There is a greed fatigue. There is a hate fatigue. There is a competition fatigue. There is an unrealistic fatigue. The society has actually pushing on a younger generation, on us, and everybody. I think that. And that schools, I think the school has to be a space for de-stress. The school needs to find bigger purpose than just teaching, solving math and science problem and language problem. Schools needs to add one more to solve the real problem of your students and the real challenge of your educators, where they can de-stress, they can come and be themselves, where they can cry, that they can actually fall apart, and where they can actually share their challenges. If we cannot do this, education is becoming big problem, the cause of suffering. The Bhante Ji, Brother Feng was talking about that, you see. We need to understand where these sufferings are coming from. So now I forgot your question.
Actually, Genla, you've actually addressed my question perfectly.
Okay.
And I cannot think of a more powerful way for us to end the session than having that moving response from you, because it's not only connects everything that Brother Phap Dung, Bhante Buddharakkhita said, but it brings it all together in the most passionate, most compelling, most visible, and most moving way, because we started with compassion and we end with this love and compassion in manifestation. So thank you so much for bringing us and lighting up our day and taking us with a new step of energy into the rest of our, in your case, evening, in Bhante Buddharakkita's time, evening, and for Bhante, for Brother Phap Dung into his day. So thank you so much, and thank you so much for all the questions. Unfortunately, we weren't able to answer all. We hope that we can reflect on them. As you know, Rumi has said, if you have a question, look for the answer within the question, and the answer will reveal itself. So look to the answer in the question you asked us, and hopefully it will all manifest in due time. So I'd like to hand over to Mark for the final conclusion of this afternoon, this evening, and this morning.
Wow. Rahina, you said earlier that we could probably have this conversation for days, and you weren't kidding. I know we definitely bumped up against time, but that was a powerful way to end the conversation. And I just wanted to say to Orla, to you and Rahina, you're masterful, heartfelt facilitators of this conversation. So thank you for leading the conversation. And in a very brief closing, I just want to send we want to send a deep bow of appreciation to Brother Phap Dung, Bhante B, and Lobsang for sharing your stories, your profoundly important insights, and your joy with us today, and with countless people around the world for the past many decades. It's a shared belief that choices made in education during the next decade will decide the fate of billions of future children and change the shape of civilization. Lobsang Bhante B and Brother Phap Dung, your work is shedding a bright light on a path forward for us and for future generations. We also wish to extend a deep bow of gratitude to our global participants, our global friends, for joining and engaging with us in this vital, important conversation for our times. In the coming days, we'll send an email with additional news and information, including how you can support and amplify the work being done by these three luminaries. We're sharing a donation link on this slide, but that will be forthcoming in the email. I would like to note that 100% of every dollar donated will equally benefit our three luminaries and the work that they do. The She community, as an open sourced organic collaboration, would love to grow and expand our work. As Bhante B mentioned, would be an important thing for us to do. If you're interested in discussing our mission and ways in which we can collaborate, please feel free to email she.mindful@gmail.com. And we welcome the opportunity to have a live conversation and become new friends on this journey with you when the time is right. And on that note, we hope you enjoy the rest of your weekend, and may the light shined on us today by these three luminaries carry us forward in our collective journey to make the world a kinder, gentler, and more sustainable place. Thank you.